Coach, you haven't faced Carson the last couple of times you've faced these guys. What's the difference between preparing for them with him versus with someone else?
Well, I would say you remember going back and preparing his ability to rip it, and then when you see it come back, because we tried to watch as much of the scheme, with him playing, and I think that was the thing that jumps out. Like, man, he can really rip it, and so I thought the accuracy was there. From the running side of things, that was, certainly a part of his game with his legs earlier in his career. But I think the thing that jumped out was his, the arm strength, the accuracy, the confidence to go put it into tight windows. Those were the things that jumped out to me.
Where does he rank in the league with guys that you've seen in the ability to kind of put it on a rope there between the numbers, in between defenders?
Yeah. I think, you'd put him up there with just about everybody that, has that kind of strength. And part of playing quarterback, and you guys know this, is kind of the toughness that goes with that. And I think those things are there, too. I can remember when I first, came into the league, I went up to visit with Joe Gibbs, and we had talked about, evaluating quarterbacks. He had won with different guys, and I'd asked him that question. And one of the parts he was talking about was toughness. And, because you're going to get hit, you're going to have to deliver and rip it. And then he was saying accuracy on the deep ball, because when your chances to go make big explosive plays, can you deliver? And I think when I think of Carson, those are two things that jump out to me. His toughness, one, and then his ability to connect on the deep balls. And I think no better example of that than in the last week's game.
Dan, how different is it scheme-wise to prepare for Carson as opposed to preparing for Nick Foles the last couple of years?
Yeah, I would say, I don't know if the scheme-wise is as big a difference because, it's a good offense, and they know how to really feature their guys. For a long time, I've been impressed, just the way they feature backs and tight ends, receivers. They make you defend everybody. I'm sure you guys can relate, covering the team. Okay, who do you have to stop this week or that? And so they make you defend the whole thing, and that's what makes them difficult. Zach certainly is, had the most production, in terms of catches and that. But they make it challenging because of the group, and that's usually a sign of a good team when there's a number of different weapons and playmakers that you have to contend with.
Dan, you and your DBs have seen DeSean up close and personal the last couple of years in the division, but looking at this long term for the rest of the season, teams that don't see him regularly, what he did Sunday, what impact does putting that on film have on defensive coaches when they and the guys that have to play against him when they look at that?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's an important answer because anytime a receiver can get by you and get on the top, what we would call like take the top off the coverage. So sometimes, there's really fast guys that will do that in what we would call like clearing out a zone. In other words, they're going to try and just, run the middle field player 50, 60 yards. He's got to go defend it, to open up an underneath throw. Well, what he's shown is they're going to run the deep route and we're going to give them a chance at it and go for it. And so that to me is the big difference because are you clearing out or are you going to go take your shot? And I think he showed and the team showed, for everybody, hey, when we get our chances to go attack, you got to go let it rip and go. And they were able to convert on those, which when you do, there's going to be, good, big explosive plays that come out of it. You don't complete them all, but the fact that you're going to take your shots at it, I think that's a big thing.
Dan, speaking of DeSean and going deep, you guys actually did pretty well against him the last 2 years. What were you guys able to do to kind of keep him somewhat under control?
Yeah, their offense, when he was in Tampa, made a bunch of explosive plays. And so, it's where they feature the players at. And so for them, how they utilized Evans and how they utilized him. And so it's, he's generally played the Z and he does that, there as well. And into that spot, there's, some advantages that happen when you're the Z. Where's the other players who are next to you, at tight end and, running back and the empty formation. So, and then the fact that they can use them in all the personnel groups, I think that's a big deal. So, give credit to him and to the staff, because different offenses, going from one, going back to the other. So, I don't know him personally, but obviously this guy's got a big football mind that he's able to, transition in and out of different schemes and offenses and be utilized in a way that suits the team. And so I thought, good on both ends by knowing how to utilize what he can do, and then how does he feature into the offense with some other playmakers.
Dan,
Dan,
last week,
in the last
last-
3 times you guys played against the Eagles, Julio's been targeted 16 times, 16 times, 19 times. Is that a function of the way the Eagles play defense on him? What do you attribute that to?
That's a good question. I didn't know that was the number of targets. He usually gets a lot anyway, just because, like that's a lot of times some of the routes and the throws go there. But, some of them on the third downs or red zone ops, you're always looking to give him a chance. He is that kind of player. But, different games, call for different stuff. But it wasn't, specific to a matchup or anything, that caused a certain amount more than others. I would say sometimes when you're behind, in a couple of those games we were behind and having to come back to try and get back in it, maybe you throw a little bit more. I don't know if, that was the case on our first game up there, maybe in the, what was that, 16 possibly.
Yeah.
We hardly had any plays, so I'm surprised he had that many targets in that game. But the last 2 games have been, close and down to it, and it's not unusual for us to throw a lot of targets.
Dan, last week, Carson Wentz hit on a lot of third downs and a lot of third and longs, and he did a lot of that in 2017. How do you defend against that?
Yeah, it's a big topic because, how do you know when you can go and get outside the pocket and still create and then rip it on the run? I think there were some good examples of that in their game against Washington where, although the coverage may have started one play, then when he gets outside and gets on the move, the second play begins. And I think the offenses that are accustomed to doing that can move with the quarterback, because in other words, the route started as one thing, and then now that he got on the move, it's, people have different terms, it could be plaster or scramble rules, and you can clearly see they're in sync to him of where to go when he gets on the move. But I think it goes back to like using your weapons. There's, a number of guys that can be involved on the third downs. When we're going through our planning, you look for the amount of, who's getting targeted in what areas. And so a number of different guys get targets. And I think that's always, difficult to defend. It's kind of like, the team that runs all the time or throws all the time. That's one deal. But when a team has balance, that's what we're striving for, and they certainly, work for that too. It makes it much more difficult to defend, especially on first, second downs.
Dan, the way the Eagles use their 2 tight ends, Zach and Dallas, how difficult is that to defend, and how does it compare to maybe other teams in the league that try and do that, and specifically just the versatility that Zach and Dallas provide?
Yeah, I think how do you use the second tight end? Because more often than not, one of them is in line. And so when you can split a player out, that's when some of the matchups that you talk about. So when a second tight end can split out and play the role of receiver, which they're fortunate that both can, because not every team has tight ends that can split out. Some have a tight end that easily can split out and play outside the box, and that's okay. But when you have 2, that's a big deal, because now are you going to put a nickel on them, or are you going to put a safety on them? So those are good topics to talk about in 12, and I think that's one of the advantages of having 2 guys that can stretch the field and run individual routes and beat man-to-man. A lot of teams have tight ends, but one's featured in an inline player, and these guys can do both. I think that's what makes their particular brand of 12 personnel, 2 tight ends, unique.
In the draft, you guys clearly looked at the first-round offensive lineman. What did you think of Andre Dillard coming out?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time with Andre. In fact, we had a visit with him here, and as you're going through the draft, you're kind of looking back to the guys. We also drafted a running back. We had spend a lot of time looking at Miles, and we had also looked at JJ. So a number of the guys that are there, we had chances to look at and evaluate too. But what we saw, number one, was at that position and playing left tackle. He's got the quickness and the length, to defeat the guys who can really fly off the edge. And so that's, the trait we saw first. And then we thought, in the system, it wouldn't take long based on his skill set to get up to speed and get going. So, we felt probably like they did, that this is a guy that has all the traits to play left tackle in our league.
Dan,
How do you game plan for guys like Fletcher Cox on the Eagles' defensive line? And would you view that as one of the team's strengths?
Yes, no question. Fletcher's been a guy, man, we've really admired his style and attitude of how he plays. So Inside, when you have a guy who's got the kind of quickness that he does, that's when it becomes, difficult matchups, whether it's against a center or a guard. And then when you combine that with the power, I think that's what gives him uniqueness. Inside for us with Grady, he's got quickness to, try to beat a guard off the spot, and sometimes with a stunt, sometimes just by getting upfield. But I have been impressed, through the years of studying him and evaluating him. That's, kind of part of the off season. You're always looking at other players and traits and, strengths of the game. And that's been the case certainly with Brandon. And Barnett was somebody that, we had, obviously watched. We went to go work out at Tennessee, and Curry we knew from the division. And so, it was a bummer to hear about Malik and his injury. You never hear for a guy with that kind of, speed and length, to be knocked out. We had one of our players with a similar injury get knocked out in Lindstrom, and had real promising, start to his season. So it's always a bummer when you see guys, getting knocked out who are really, putting in the work.
Dan,
one more, guys.
the last 3 games against these guys, Dan, Matt's passing numbers have been very un-Matt-like. 73 passer rating, just 2 touchdown passes. Is there a common thread in those 3 games that this defense is with what this defense has done to kind of keep him down?
Yeah, I think number one, we've been impressed by the red zone defense. That's we had our chances, to throw for touchdown passes and take it all the way down to the end of the game. So when we were not able to convert on those, we certainly give them the credit for it. We had our moments to go nail it, and we just missed it. So I would say, we've definitely been impressed, certainly by the red zone defense, by Jim and all the players. They've executed in that spot. But, they've been tough fought, close games, and, we've been on the other end of it. But can't wait to get rocking again this week. I got time for about one more if you guys are ready to wrap it up.
Okay, if I could ask you about Matt Gono, who's a local guy for us.
Yeah. Yep.
I know he had the back injury this past week, but how has he been doing overall? I saw he was starting some in the preseason, and what's his status for this week?
Yep, you got it. I'll hit you up. He's he's from South Jersey and then went to Wesley. And then last year we signed him as an undrafted free agent and made the 53. We kind of redshirted him, so to speak, to put all the time into the development. He had actually, even coming from a small school, really good strength, really good tools. And then he just needed NFL work, over and over. He really put it in as he came back into the offseason. We obviously were making some moves at the offensive line, but he's one that jumped out to us, the development that he made. It was significant. So we played him a lot in the preseason. We played him a lot with the first group. He's got versatility. He can play both tackle and guard. His first year, we just parked him at right tackle, left him there, and helped him, get up to speed. But since that time, we've put him at right tackle, left tackle. He can play both the guard spots, and we've done that in the game. So he had injured his back the week prior. He's back in a limited fashion today. Too early to say if he'll be ready for the game, but he's been a good story for us about the work that you can put in and the development that you can make.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Coach.
All right, we'll see you down here, guys. Thank you.